My name is Maulian Dana. I'm the Penobscot Nation Tribal Ambassador, and I want to thank you all so much for having me keynote your event. When I got the request to speak here, I thought this is probably a room full of people that could also give amazing talks. So I feel so fortunate to be able to share space, even virtually, even removed, and doing this through a recording. I can still feel the great energy of this event, and I'm just very thankful that we're able to connect, even though it is a little bit um, different than it would be if we were able to be together. And I do apologize for having to do this virtually with the weather and illness and just this pandemic that doesn't seem to want to let go. This is where we're at. But it did, the circumstances of this caused me to reflect on the theme of gather. And I feel like, gathering around food equity and justice, that can be done in so many different ways. And the good thing about the COVID era of the past few years that we've found ourselves in is that we have gotten creative when it comes to how we gather and what that looks like, and how we are still exchanging ideas and sharing space and doing all of this good work that moves progress forward when it comes to equity, when it comes to sovereignty, when it comes to just the life of the everyday person in the communities that we're all serving. So needless to say, I am very impressed and happy with the mission that you all are gathering, and your intent. I guess I really enjoy the motivation and the inspiration for sharing with you today. I think that I can't really think of many organizations or causes that would pull together, food equity and justice and all this sort of thing. So I was reading through, your mission, and I kept this in mind when crafting these points to speak with you today, to highlight and uplift organizations led by and primarily working with Black, Brown, Indigenous immigrants, refugees, and asylum seeking communities. So that clearly, my work with Wabanaki Alliance clearly fits into the mission of Good Food, uh, Good Shepherd Food Bank, and the Gather event that we are celebrating this week. So, in our culture, wintertime is used for storytelling, and I thought it would be neat to use this keynote to convey some cultural values of my people that really fit into I think the message and the mission and the good work that all of you are doing. So I chose a story called Gloucester and the Magic Game Bag. And I really like this story because it reinforces the values of selflessness and how to think about not just the good of your community, but how the good of your community impacts the good of you, the individual, and how everyone moving forward together for the next generations is made better by the decisions that we make or don't make today. And a little bit about our storytelling practices. I don't consider myself a storyteller or all that qualified to do so. It's a skill that's very much honed in our traditions and perfected by our really good storytellers. So I'm not the best, but I've learned these stories as a young child. I've told them to my own children. I've had different interactions with them and tried to weave them into my work and my career. And we use wintertime as a way to sit in the stillness and the quietness of the world and to slow down a bit. But storytelling gives us a way to still feel connected and still kind of we're actively moving towards goals together, even if we can't do as much physically out in the world because it's cold or dangerous, or we can't be out for that long. We're still working our minds and our spirits, and sharing traditions and values with our children. And the cool thing about these legends is that our people, didn't write things down. Our languages and our history and our values and these stories are all passed on through oral tradition. So that's neat because you can see when the languages were written down a long time ago, mostly with, assistance from anthropologists and different folks. The stories that were captured back then have, changed and evolved a little bit with each generation of storytellers, but they're very much still the same. And I think that even if different people take liberties with details or things like that, the core messages still come through. So this story features Gluscabe, and he is a figure in our legends that, is used in a few different ways. We have a set of legends when he is older, and he is a protector and a healer, and sort of this mythical but attainable human-like magical person. And I think it's hard to put into the English language a lot of the concept of Gluscabe. He's just sort of larger than life, but one of us. And it's said that he stays at Mount Katahdin, and when we need him, he'll come back to help the people. So Katahdin is obviously a sacred place for our people, and that's just one of the ties to our very ancient ways of knowing that is directly related to Katahdin as a sacred space. The story I'm going to share with you all has to do with Gluscabe as a young person. And I like the legends of Gluscabe as a child and a teen and an adolescent, because he's learning so much and growing, and he's doing so by making some mistakes. And I really find that to be so empowering, because here we have one of the highest level beings in our culture. And so much of his growth and journey is because he was short-sighted, because he was acting selfish, because he was, being narcissistic, or all these, qualities that we look down on and don't want to have. But we're all human, and we're all growing, and we're all learning. So we all have touches of that, and we've all made mistakes. So the one in charge of teaching Gluscabe, which is quite a big job, is his grandmother, who is a woodchuck in our stories. And I find that so many of those good grandmother woodchuck teachings are so undervalued sometimes. I feel like a lot of times we focus so much on Gluscabe, but he becomes this great person and spirit and being to our people because of everything she taught him. So in our traditional ways, we would have the chief of the tribe would usually be a male, and the kind of matriarchs and the clan mothers would advise him constantly. So it really speaks to that system as well, how we see Gluscabe and his grandmother in these legends. So this story starts when Gluscabe is a teenager-ish, adolescence, and he was always in charge of hunting and gathering and providing for himself and grandmother woodchuck. And he was, having a hard time hunting and not having a whole lot of luck securing game and fish to bring home to eat. So he thought if he had a different game bag, the bag that he would put his kills in, maybe if he had better tools, better resources, he would be more successful as a hunter. So he asked grandmother woodchuck to make him a new game bag. So grandmother woodchuck agreed, and she used a beautiful deer hide and put in a lot of work, a lot of love, and made him this new game bag out of a deer hide. And she presented it to him, and he said, "That's not what I want. it's great, but it's not going to give me the success I'm looking for. So Grandmother Woodchuck agreed to make him a new one, and she used a moose hide. So it was bigger, it was a little tougher, and she spent even more time on it and put in even more love. And when she presented this to Gluscabe, he had the same reaction, that it just wasn't quite what he was looking for or hoping for. So Grandmother Woodchuck decided to make some magic, and she plucked hairs from her own belly and wove them together into a beautiful magical bag for Gluscabe. And when he saw that bag, he knew it was special. He knew there was something magical about it, and he really knew that it would help him in his quest hunting. So Gluscabe brought this magic game bag into the forest, and he had an idea. He said, "All you animals, there's a danger coming. You have to come see me and get into my bag, and I'll take you to safety, and I'll protect you from this danger that's coming throughout the world." So the animals listened, and they heard Gluscabe, and they were kind of pulled in by his magic and by his voice, and they all walked into his game bag, and the bag grew and expanded, and all the animals and the including the fish and the birds and everything on Turtle Island, which is what we call the Earth in our legends, made their way into this bag. So Gluscabe was overjoyed. He thought, "We will never go hungry again. Grandmother Woodchuck will be so proud of me, and I'll bring all of this bounty home to her." So when Grandmother Woodchuck had a different reaction, Gluscabe was confused. She looked at everything he brought home, and she told him, "This is too much. You can't take everything for us. Even though you want to provide, even though you thought you were clever, you lied to all of these animals and you misled them. And now, if you take them all for us, there'll be nothing for anyone else, either now or in the future, and we will die out. There'll be no humans, no animals, nobody to live in balance with the earth anymore if all of these animals are gone right now." So, Gluscabe was always learning these tough lessons. He thought that he had been so crafty and so clever in telling this lie to the animals. But in fact, by doing this, he was harming not just the future generations, not just the other people in the world, but himself and Grandmother Woodchuck, because he was putting their needs above everyone else's. So he took the animals back out to the forest, and he told them, "The danger has passed. Please leave this bag, live full, happy lives. And, sorry to scare you all, but now you're all safe." So the animals were relieved. They went back out into the world. Gluscabe hunted only what he needed. And now we have a system with the animals, when we're living in line with those values of balance, of trust, of respect. And when we are out of line with those values, that's where we fear for the next generations. When we are harmful or not truthful or think we're being clever, but we're spreading false, lies and all this sort of thing, that's when things are out of balance. And that's when we need those Grandmother Woodchuck teachings. So at the end of our stories, we say Tahu. That kind of means the end. So Tahu, that's the end of that story. And I found that to be especially poignant for this discussion, because I feel that, if we can all reflect on those Grandmother Woodchuck teachings, it's not just good for us, it's good for these communities that we build and nurture and grow, and we have goals together that can feel overwhelming, that can feel unattainable. Speaking from the tribal perspective and the work that the Wabanaki Alliance does, tribal sovereignty being recognized in the state of Maine when we have been living under the Maine Indian Land Claims Settlement Act feels incredibly overwhelming. Sometimes it feels like we keep coming back to the table and being shut down, and it doesn't matter what political party or who's in office. We've had a lot of the same results throughout the years, and that is, we come to the table to these discussions with proof that the Settlement Act has undermined sovereignty, has, had bad consequences, not just for the tribal people of Maine, but for all of Maine, especially those rural communities that surround the reservation tribal nations. We actually, I would love for you all to check out the recent work by the Wabanaki Alliance, that we commissioned a report from researchers at Harvard, and they found that, the Settlement Act and not having access to federal Indian law for the tribes in Maine, it has had a negative impact on everyone in Maine, and these rural communities and these towns surrounding reservations, and really everyone could have had a much more prosperous 40 years or so than we have had because of the Settlement Act. So I think that as we think about what's next for tribal sovereignty, and I know a lot of you are very plugged into what we're working on and what we're doing, please follow Wabanaki Alliance, and please think about how we can collaborate and continue to advance equity and justice for all people in Maine, especially those marginalized, vulnerable, frontline folks that I know that so many of you are representing and thinking about, and you're part of these communities and advocating daily. So I want to tie in the story I told, and a lot of the things you folks have been talking about all day, and then the work that my organization is doing, and the tribal nations are doing. And I think that the best way to do that is to think about those teachings of Grandmother Woodchuck. And I think that, I've talked about that feeling of being overwhelmed, that feeling of having to put out this fire with like teaspoons of water. And when we're in a place like Maine, where inequities are layered on top of each other with kind of social constructs and realities in that realm, and then policy has been super oppressive to people like my people and a lot of others throughout the generations, it's helpful to think about how we are promoting this work individually, but for that collective good, but not to get lost in that work for the collective good. And I think that that's what is so powerful about our teachings and our stories, is that you have Gloucester on his journey of making mistakes and learning and growing and coming to a place of wanting to heal and help. And I see so many of us doing this work, and we're still on that journey. We're still making mistakes. We still act selfishly sometimes. We still harm sometimes. So I think it's really important to focus on growth, and that we are still on this journey. None of us have reached this ultimate enlightenment, state where we are the end all be all for ourselves or for organizations. So, that was the message I really wanted to convey in this talk, is that as long as we are, all holding each other, not accountable, but in a place of grace, I think that that's where we can really advance so many of these things that we're working on as neighbors and friends and collaborators in Maine. When we look at policy, or social movements, or things as simple as getting basic needs met for people in our communities. So to kind of wrap up here, I wanted to just, give a little bit of an overview about the work of the Wabanaki Alliance of the past few years, and where we go from here, so that you can all stay in the loop. And if there's ever a time where something your organization is doing you think might be a good fit for something we're working on, please feel free to reach out. And yeah, and we are only as strong as the most vulnerable among us. So I think that as we advance and advocate for different types of things in the state, it's really important to bring each other along. And I've certainly seen that across areas of the work that I get to do. So the Wabanaki Alliance, we were able to get some really interesting and, meaningful pieces of work done. We have not yet meaningfully amended that 1980 Maine Indian Land Claims Settlement Act. I know a lot of you are probably familiar with LD 1626 of last session. That was based on a task force of tribal leaders and lawmakers that were looking to amend the Settlement Act and really study it and see where it is holding back not just the tribes, but tribal state relations in Maine with government and everyone else. So the things we were able to do were some taxation relief for people in tribal communities, some parameters around collaborating with state government, some gaming provisions, so online sports betting, when it kind of comes on board and really starts to unfold in Maine, the tribes will have rights to a lot of that revenue. And gaming it's a very complicated and layered issue. People have ethical feelings about it and moral feelings for sure. And it's not an industry that really feels all that uplifting or positive a lot of the times. But I think when thinking about tribal sovereignty, it's really important that the tribes in the lands now called Maine, our homelands, should have the rights of other tribes around the country. And extending some of this gaming operations is in line with trying to get us to that place of parity with other tribes in the nation. So we were able to get some things done. I think probably the largest legislative achievement of the last session was LD 906, and that was working towards getting clean water for the Passamaquoddy people of Sabayak. And it's an absolute human rights crisis that they don't have clean water and haven't for generations. So that was a great example of appealing to the humanity of lawmakers. I think that a lot of times we get stuck in words and sides of the aisle. And I think that issue is one that we were able to talk to lawmakers and really say, put yourselves in the Passamaquoddy people's shoes. Think about not being able to have clean water for yourselves, for your parents, for your children, for your elders. And I'm really hoping as we move into this new session and some new kind of fresh but old takes on those amendments to the Settlement Act and the sovereignty legislation, we can continue to have those discussions with lawmakers based on humanity and based on those common feelings that we all have as human beings. I know that in my work around Indian mascots and changing Columbus Day to Indigenous Peoples Day, a lot of the progress that I made with folks on a one-to-one basis individually was talking through that humanity, using words and phrases like, how would you feel or picture this in your situation and in your family and your community, and to do that in a way where it doesn't feel attacky or abrasive, but in a very honest and straightforward way, not sugarcoating things either. That was where I saw a lot of great change on an individual level. And those things can really snowball and people, once they hear the humanity in you, they open themselves up a lot more and they tend to bring folks along with them. Not everyone, but some. So as we look to these big issues in Maine and think about big solutions, I think that all progress, no matter how small, is getting us towards those goals of greater equity, of racial justice, of tribal sovereignty, and all that good work. So we would love, as this new session takes shape under Speaker Talbot Ross and Minority Leader Fockingham, both of whom have been to tribal lands and met with tribal folks already. Please stay in the loop on things, wabanakaalliance.com, and reach out if you think that any of our causes might line up with things that you all are working on. I know that everyone, in this gathering here has great work that you're doing and great things to offer, and we would love to be in the work with you all as well. I want to thank all the organizers at Good Shepherd Food Bank. I will continue to to flip flop those words. All the organizers at Good Shepherd Food Bank, and everyone who is in attendance and watching this recording. And I do apologize for the kind of distance nature of this. I would love to have been there in person with you all, but that is not the way the universe worked in this instance. And I am really happy to be able to get my words out to you, at a later date. And I think that wrapping this up here, just let's move forward in this work together. Let's remember those teachings of Grandmother Woodchuck. And I think it's important to not lose yourself in the quest of being selfless. And I think that those Gluscabé stories really teach us that it's okay to embrace the whole of who we are as we make our way towards who we want to be. So thank you. I hope that this was helpful, and please stay in touch with us. And I look forward to seeing you all in person and around the State House and around the state as we all move forward together. So Kachiwaliwini, thank you so much.